You've guessed it. It's Tuesday. It's VA Disability Talk time. Hey, thank you for all your support, everybody out there, and for talking VA disability with me. Again, look forward to all your comments and your sharing and your likes and yeah, your support in general. I do appreciate it. I really do. Let's make this process easier. Let's talk about more VA disability stuff. I try to keep these videos down a little bit, so do expect there always to be more at some point of these videos talking about these topics in a little bit more detail and some more detail that I miss. I say that because I'm going to do a quick summary on duty to assist today. So, BA accredited attorney methoding here, for those who don't know, just throw that out there. All that years of experience. I'm not here to talk about all that today. We get into that periodically in the channel that I will share some experience moments with you. And heck, I even had a little while back ago, we did a walk down memory lane just to kind of put that out there and let everybody kind of see what some of that looked like. And maybe do that again sometime too. But for today, let's do an overview of duty to assist. We've heard duty to assist. We've talked a little bit about it before. It's really reared its head in a lot of stuff we do. Duty to assist is extremely crucial with the VA. It has to be, again, the biggest error that is seen, and such an error that when they wrote the new PIL laws, that underneath the HLR, the higher level review, they can actually call duty to assist errors. In fact, the BVA is always remanded for things like the duty to assist errors, and that's their primary focus when they do remand the cases back. So duty to assist is a big focus in the VA. There are a lot of laws that govern it, a lot of actions that can violate it, a lot of things that just have to be done and done correctly. So what is it? Well, as you've kind of gathered, it's the cornerstone of the non-adversarial VA claim process. May not always feel that way, but it's definitely the cornerstone of the process. It refers to the VA's legal obligation to help veterans obtain evidence needed to substantiate their claims. You're going to find this governed by the United States Code and the CFR. Again, the Veterans Assistance Act of 2000 really started putting this in place, so you're going to see a lot of duty to assist in that 38 USC, United States Code. Try putting United States Code and Code of Federal Regulations together. Boy, that'll mess you up. Let's try that again. 38 USC, that's USC standing for the United States Code. That's the section, subsection 5103A is a good starting point there. So, underneath the duty to assist requirements, what is the VA required to do? So, VA must notify veterans or claimants of evidence needed to substantiate the claim. What kind of evidence could that be? Well, veterans, you're going to see a letter that used to be like 13, 14, 15 or more pages. It was so convoluted, it was just nuts. VA has really made that a lot shorter letter, but they've also put it in front of the forms request. Like a 526EZ, you're going to see a bunch of pages in the front before you can actually do the form. Some of the claim has a few pages too, that 20-0995. So it kind of is notifying you really in those pieces there. But every now and then a requirement comes up to give you more information or just to re-verify, make sure you got that information and that requirement's met. So a lot of times you'll get these letters, honestly, veterans, that'll be very generic in what kind of evidence is needed. The letters, we used to go through and they may still today on some of them, but we used to go through and actually delete the paragraphs for the evidence that we didn't need. Once we went through the claim and kind of try to focus on those evidence that we did need to substantiate the claim, because that's the purpose of the duty to assist. But you will get a lot of letters that will just list everything, and it may look confusing, but that's what those are. Those are supposed to be letters to adhere to the duty to assist and telling you what evidence is needed. And they'll usually say something like your service treatment records and your personnel treatment, your service personnel records, your private medical records, and all kinds of other stuff, and they'll just lay it all out. So keep in mind, not probably the best way of notifying and you of what evidence is needed, but it's there. That's how that requirement is being fulfilled. Now, not only is that a requirement underneath the duty to assist, but there is also a request of relevant federal records. So veterans, when you file your claims, let's say you file 526EZ. It's your original claim, first claim you've ever filed with the VA. You're not required to send to the VA your treatment records from service. Likely you don't have them. VA actually has to go out and try to obtain those records. There's a process underneath duty to assist to go to the service departments, to different locations and to archives and wherever they need to go to obtain that information. Now, that's the same with your service personnel records. So if you've got a condition that needs your service personnel records or something that might be in them, VA's got to go get that too. A lot of times we used to see it with PTSD, not as much anymore, but it's still possible. PTSD is a big one that can go out and get personnel records. A lot of times you're trying to get certain information of the event that occurred that might be documented locations and so forth. But either way, that's the point. They're federal records. They're federal records. And I think what's fascinating here, and one thing that we struggle, I think, government-wide still, as the systems start talking to each other more and so forth, is a reservist. I feel bad. As I was a reservist before, and as I was learning that job as a human resource assistant, it came to my attention that in the reserve setup, at least in the time I was in, struggled with, not as much anymore because of the paperless world, I think has helped out. But if you were in during that paper world, paper was stored everywhere. There was no central location, typically, and you found that your records were usually located with your local unit. A lot of times units were too small. Maybe units were deployed or partially deployed, half deployed. They took their human resource person away. They took their unit administrator, whatever they call them these days, away. And no one knew how to do that job. I mean, paperwork's not for everybody. I'm not handy myself, so even I have limitations to different jobs. I think we all do. So sometimes you would find that this paperwork got kind of thrown everywhere in different places, and sometimes you would quickly hire somebody. Go, no, look, I got somebody in who can handle this, not realizing they need some additional training and understanding what the rules are and the regulations, and because there's a lot of them, and where those files are supposed to be kept, how they're supposed to be kept. So a lot of times they weren't transferred to archive locations like they were supposed to. So I tell this story because this is something that the VA's got to really struggle with as well. They really have to go out and they have to look from all these different locations when things like this happen. So this is part of the duty to assist. You can't just stop at one location. Well, wasn't there. Well, what about here? What about there? And that was the case back then, especially paper. I remember contacting 3 or 4, 5, 6 different locations a lot of times looking for records. So that's just part of the duty to assist. That's what the VA is there to do underneath the law. So they're going to go get those federal records, especially those treatment records, those personnel records when needed. Any records from other federal agencies. Sometimes veterans, your claim is going to require whatever maybe the Social Security Administration has. If you've got benefits coming from there underneath the disability, for example, there might be some medical records in there. And that might be helpful for your file. If those are identified, they gotta go get them. We gotta go get them. Some of the other stuff they've got to do when it comes to requesting records on these duty to assist isn't always federal based. So veterans, it's ultimately your responsibility in your private treatment, in your primary care treatment, if it's outside of the VA facility, to really obtain those records. But there is still a requirement in the duty to assist rules and laws that the VA must make reasonable efforts to obtain those private medical records that you've identified. So that's one thing you'll see in a lot of those letters. They'll ask you to file or give them a complete and submit a VA form 21-4142 and 4142A, which is the authorization to release these records to the VA on your behalf. So that becomes a crucial document so the VA can make those reasonable attempts. Part of that reasonable attempt is asking you really for that document there. Now, they'll go out and through usually their contractors who are involved and do so many requests and follow up and so forth. But there is a limit to the duty to assist. They're not going to look forever for records or at that point. So do know that the duty to assist says make reasonable efforts on records that aren't federal. So ultimately it could be your responsibility to provide those records there. Now, this is the crucial one. We've talked about a lot of when it comes to duty to assist, VA examinations and medical opinions, VA medical opinions. This is crucial. This is part of the VA's duty to assist. They have to not only provide medical examinations and opinions when necessary, but they've got to be adequate. If they're not adequate, duty to assist has not been fulfilled, and that's where we see a lot of those errors, and why I feel that the appeals language now says, well, you can make a decision to kick it back for duty to assist. And that's usually what we see is an exam. Now, we also see a lot of times asking for exams aren't needed, but hey, that's a different story. But keep in mind, there are rules that says, hey, okay, for example, there's an in-service event, some sort of event or occurrence, whether that be documented in your STRs or not, veterans, your service treatment records, it doesn't have to be. It could be just the idea that there's, say, a statement that you've provided, perhaps, that talks about an injury that just did not get treated, maybe because you were in a combat zone and it couldn't be treated. You didn't have anybody to treat it. Maybe all you had was medics that had limited resources and they couldn't provide you more with the typical Motrin and a little bit of water. These things happen, not even in combat situations, but even in garrison situations. Maybe there's some other documentation in there that shows a location that you served, or maybe your MOS or your duties in general could be these events. So as long as you've got some sort of showing there, and again, I can't talk to the facts of your case. Every fact of every case is different. So keep that in mind, that this is kind of a general overview of this. But once you got that, and you've got, you have claimed a condition for which doesn't usually need some sort of medical diagnosis, or you've provided that medical diagnosis. I'm saying this because I'm starting to see this a lot. When it comes to VA's violation of duty to assist, I'm seeing a lot where veterans will claim something like migraines and VA will send letters going, well, we can't address it until you give us medical evidence diagnosing it. That's not the way due process works. The veteran is competent to say that they suffer from condition, especially certain symptoms, and thus that could be enough right there, as the courts have said, to trigger the duty to assist when you've got the in-service piece, the potential current diagnosis or the current diagnosis, and then that plausibility that the two are linked together. So that's the duty to assist piece there. Now, when that happens, we get into a whole bunch of other argument on the adequacy of those exams and how those meet the duty to assist requirements there. And these are big challenges. That's why I'm spending so much time on this one, because I think the VA pretty much has down the gathering of the records and the assistance there of the records. It's those VA exams and medical opinions we have struggled with for years in the VA system. I feel like it's only getting worse, unfortunately. So I'm highlighting this VA for you. This is very crucial. Go review all the court cases, review your manual, review your rules and your laws, the United States Code, the CFR, review it in detail. This is crucial. This is where duty to assist, I find, typically falls apart. All right, veterans. For you, though, keep in mind that this is part of the duty to assist, that VA has to go out and get relevant federal records. That also includes your VA treatment records, which I forgot to mention. They also got to make reasonable efforts to obtain your private medical records that were identified, if you've identified any, and they got to provide you that medical examination or opinion when the criteria, the low threshold there is met, and that criteria is met there. So that is what the duty to assist requires of the VA in a nutshell there. And I've already talked about, I got ahead of myself. I'm looking at my notes. I got ahead of myself. When the VA must provide an examination or opinion. So again, the competent evidence of a current disability or persistent recurring symptoms, evidence of an in-service event, injury, or disease that includes your lay evidence, again, your personal statement. Just because your STRs don't document it, it's not the end of the world. VA, keep that in mind. I see it in your decisions all the time. You say it's not the STRs and you're done. There's other evidence you got to look at. There's an indication that the current disabilities, it's plausible essentially that there could be related to the current disability and the associated event in service, or the occurrence there, or the disease in service, and then there's insufficient medical evidence. So the record to make decisions. See, there's another thing I did forget, so I'm glad I went through his notes. Veterans, if your medical records hit every point that the VA needs in order to make the decision, so if you happen to say, you know what, I want to help the VA out, and I'm going to go get my own examination done instead of waiting for the VA to do it, and I'm going to have my doctor provide complete, adequate legal and medical opinion as to my situation, and you provide all that and everything is adequate, hey, VA doesn't need to necessarily get an exam there. The duty to assist is not does not fire off at that point because the record has sufficient evidence at that point to make the decision. Now, keep in mind, facts of the case. I'm doing this as a very general overview, but if the evidence is not sufficient, yeah, the VA's got a duty for the exam as well. So yeah, boy, and there we go. Now, just to highlight again that CVA for the duty to assist is not required veterans to continue development indefinitely. So again, like those prior treatment records, at some point they're going to be done after that reasonable those reasonable attempts. Unfortunately, at certain points too, there are after requesting say service treatment records, and it's come to a head where it's just clearly futile at this point to continue asking because they just can't be found, or maybe they were burned in the fire in the 70s at the archives. Then yeah, there's these requirements can be limited. Clearly they can't go any further at that point. So usually when efforts would be futile, that's kind of the end of that there. But do remember again, veterans, that like you said, when I talked about that personal medical evidence, that the duty to assist by the VA does not relieve you of your responsibilities either. So if you do have copies of those records, you got things to submit, evidence to submit that corresponds to your claim, you do have a responsibility to submit that evidence if the VA needs it. So, as we probably already know at this point, what happens when the VA fails that duty to assist? Well, if we get to the Board of Veterans Appeals, we're going to see a remand for corrective action, so it goes back down to the VA. This is always a fun struggle for me. I'm just going to give you an insight back here and kind of tell the VA what it looks like, hoping that they can kind of watch this a little closer. It's my suggestion and recommendation again, not that it's required, but the idea is that when the board remands, the concern is that this remand goes back to the VA, the same location where the errors were made over and over. Again, the duty to assist was not fulfilled over and over. At least by the time I take it to the Board of Veterans Appeals, it's been a few times. I've given the VA a chance to fulfill and their duty to assist requirements. The VA is going to, if the VA remands it, they're going to ask the VA to do it again, and then guess what happens? Well, can't get blood from a turnip or something like that, as I hear. So we usually get more duty to assist errors. So at that point, veterans understand that you may want to talk to your representative on a strategy and how we can get around that, including coming to myself again, Veteran Lane, to discuss different possibilities for that and different methods to, once we get to the board, we increase the chances of avoiding the remand because we fulfilled the VA's duty to assist for them at that point. Same with the Court of Veterans, Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims. They can even vacate or remand a board decision when the board fails the duty to assist requirement. And that's usually what we see there when we get up there. If the board, the BVA or the Board of Appeals, as it's known, fails on a duty to assist part 2 when they make a decision, it can happen. It does happen. Then the court can say, hey, we're sending it back for you to send back down and get corrected, and for you to correct the mistake now. And then we go through the whole chain. Duty to assist, like I said, yeah, it's huge. And ultimately what it's doing here when the failure occurs is keeping us in a wheel running around like a bunch of hamsters on a wheel. So definitely want to take it more seriously is what I ask of the VA. Really pay attention to it, really look at it, really understand all the rules and laws and make sure it's being done right, so we're not wasting everybody's time in the process. And the veterans getting what they rightfully deserve and are entitled to as quick as possible. Well, there's that. Let's keep that one just a little bit shorter than that 30-minute line there. There's your overview of duty to assist everybody and some of my gripes and complaints and requests. That's really what it comes down to. There's a lot of law out there. Again, for all the different moving parts in the duty to assist, whether it's federal records that's got to be requested, whether it's private records that's got to be attempted to on a request, whether it's a VA medical exam or opinion, or whether it's when the duty to assist does not fire off because the evidence is already all there. these are things that have to be understood when making decisions to avoid these decisions from being overturned and remanded and thrown back into the wheel of errors, as we'll call it at this point, where it just circles around and around and around and around for no good reason. So there you go. Duty to assist. Again, if you have any comments on topics you want to hear about or discuss, or any other questions or concerns about divulging personal information or all the facts of your case, please feel free to leave those in the comments, and I'll be happy to address those for you, and perhaps even a full video. We've done that before, which is awesome. But just remember, I can't advise you in this platform, so if you do want that additional advisement or help or see what we can do for you, don't forget to reach out to veteranline.com. You can schedule on my calendar there, or even give us a phone call from there. If you're in the Surprise or Phoenix area, stop in, say hi. We'd love to have you in here and listen to your stories and see what we can do to help. Have a terrific, tremendous Tuesday, everyone, and I'll see you next week. Thank you again.